So I'm pleased to inform you that this forum serves as a follow-up to the highly productive ASC event that was held back in November last year. The ASC meeting was a collaborative and innovative approach and laid the groundwork for advancing our collective efforts to combat energy theft effectively. And today we want to build upon that momentum and expand the dialogue further by providing you with important updates since this event, as well as providing you with the opportunity to feedback on some of the initiatives that we have. We've got a packed agenda today, and this involves updates as well as feedback from yourselves in the form of polls and discussions to help keep you engaged. And as mentioned previously, we will have 2 dedicated Q&A slots for you to ask any questions, and we'll also allow time for a quick comfort break also, as we appreciate it's quite a long session today. So if we get started, let's embark on this collective journey to explore some innovative strategies and share some knowledge amongst us. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy today's forum. Thank you. So if we move on to the next slide, please, we have John, who will be presenting the RECCo theft strategy.
Thanks, Aisha. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Tracy? Thank you. So I'll be brief on this section that's providing some context to our theft reduction strategy, because I'm aware that many of the people on the call will be familiar with this either through attendance of that ASC event that Aisha referred to that we held back in November, or through the engagement that we've had through the UK Revenue Protection Association, etc. But I think it's important to kind of set out what we're doing and how everything fits together, because we are trying to approach this with a very kind of rounded strategy that covers off all aspects of what we need to tackle. We've learned some lessons from other anti-fraud strategies, etc., which have this kind of self-reinforcing approach to it, where we focus not just on one element, for instance, the detection of it, but we also focus on a deterrent effect and making sure that the industry or whomever is acting to tackle theft is properly empowered and has the right tools in the kit to tackle this. So we've developed this approach, which some of you, as I say, will have seen this before. Fundamentally, we need to better understand the problem, and I'll come on to that in a moment, in terms of not just the scale of energy theft in GB, but where that's happening, what kind of techniques have been employed by thieves, etc., in order that we can properly tackle it. That will help inform our preventative measures. This is perhaps the hardest element to provide quantification of progress around, because we always feel that a deterrent is the biggest and most effective aspect of what we can be doing. I think the greater part of this, and we'll come on to this later when colleagues, and in particular Annette, come on to the Stay Energy Safe campaign, is to recognise that this isn't just a financial crime, this is also a safety issue. So an awful lot of what we're doing focuses on that aspect and making sure that we're trying to keep consumers safe from harm, both of themselves and their property, etc., rather than focusing on perhaps the revenue protection element of it. So I think that's a bit of a break from the past. We nonetheless do want to make sure that we're providing as much analysis and insights and tools to help the industry detect theft where it does occur. And then finally, making sure that once theft is detected, that, as I said earlier, you've got the tools in order to be able to do something about that. And we'll come on to some of those aspects later. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Tracy. So in terms of better understanding the problem, you'll have seen hopefully that we published a theft estimation methodology report towards the back end of last year. That was our biggest deliverable in the theft space for 2022. We commissioned that report. It was via Capgemini, but produced entirely independently of RECCo in terms of the analysis that went into it and the conclusions of it. I don't think the number that came out with was a surprise to many people, insofar as the last estimates that the industry had been referring to were those carried out by Ofgem maybe 10 years ago, and the cost of energy had obviously gone up since then. So we were expecting the number to be greater. But I think the important thing with this is not to focus on the financial aspects, because that is a bit of a movable feast, as you'd expect. It can move up and down purely with wholesale price changes. But what we do want to do is focus on the amount of energy that we assess as being stolen, and then use that as a robust benchmark going forward to assess whether or not we're having any impact on that, and whether we're able to bend the curve of the amount of energy being stolen, but also to kind of determine the proportionality of any mitigating measures we might employ, and whether or not it's providing a reasonable return on investment, etc. I think this theft estimation methodology has already proven its value as far as it's not only informing our own theft reduction strategy, but it's had external influences. I think it's fair to say it's had an impact on the allocation of unidentified gas, for instance, and it was referred to by Ofgem in its decision letter on UNC modification 840, which moved some of the allocation of those UIG costs away from PPM customers and brought it back into line with credit consumers. So I think, again, the more analysis we can carry out, the more data we can collect, the more insights we can provide back to industry, we'll have a benefit, not just in terms of reducing theft numbers, but better informing policy, etc., more generally. If we can move on from there, please, Tracy. Again, picking up on where Aisha touched upon the workshop that was carried out, the Accelerated Solutions Environment event last November, that provided an awful lot of feedback for us as a RECCo team and the wider set of stakeholders in terms of trying to tackle theft. All of that output was captured and is available on our website. So if you weren't able to attend the day, all of that material is still there. And I think, depending on whether you see this as a good or a bad thing, we were given an awful lot of actions from that workshop to carry forward, and they helped inform our forward work plan for 2023, 24 and beyond. So we do see this as being a multi-year programme of work rather than something that we're just going to focus on for the next 12 months. Key amongst those, I think it's fair to say that the industry had felt there was an absence of a forum like today where subject matter experts and other stakeholders can get together to discuss theft issues. The RECCo model, since theft had been brought across to us in April 2021, hadn't provided that kind of stakeholder engagement. So we tackle that in two aspects. So we've re-established a theft reduction expert group that now meets on a monthly basis, and I know that several of the members of that group are on this call. And we will also carry out periodic stakeholder forum like this, which is completely open invitation, anybody can dial into it. So we're hoping that by having that combination of a small group of dedicated subject matter experts can provide us ongoing insights and continuity, but we can also open up communications and be more transparent with a wider forum such as this. All of that will help inform the kind of second strand of our objectives, which is to raise awareness of theft as a problem, potentially go beyond that in terms of providing guidance, not just to the industry, but to the general public. I think this ties into an extent with some of the campaigns around Stay Energy Safe, etc., but also potentially informing other stakeholders of the issues, whether that be media, whether that be politicians, policymakers, etc. That would all come under that strand. And of course, do all of that, we need to make sure that we've got very robust data and analytics in which to base all of our initiatives and make sure that everything's as data driven and as well evidenced as possible. Once we've done all that and we know more about the problem, we're hoping to carry out further work around improving incentives. Those of you who are familiar with the industry know that there's a theft detection incentive scheme that's operated under the RECCo. We implemented some changes to that with effect from 1st of April this year, and we're hoping to make some further changes for the 1st of April next year in terms of how that existing scheme operates. But we're also hoping to identify where there may be incentives or a lack of incentives on other parties, not just upon suppliers. So we'll be carrying out some work on that as well, and we'll touch upon what we're doing and the progress on that in a moment. And then finally, going back to that idea of making sure that the industry has the right tools in the armoury, we have to recognise that there are limitations on what we can do as industry parties. Stealing energy is ultimately a criminal offence as well as being dangerous. So it's important that we collaborate effectively with other agencies, in particular the police. And we'll touch upon that again in later slides. So the final thing I'd like to mention, just that all of the actions that were picked up from that ASE event back in November have been captured. They're all available on the RECCo website. They're being discussed with the Energy Theft Reduction Expert Group regularly to make sure that we're accountable for the delivery against those actions. And the next thing we'll touch upon is how we're bundling those up into individual projects that we're delivering on an agile basis. I'll hand you over to Tracy, who will explain more. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So yeah, as John's just said, from the ASE event, we came out with a number of actions, actually 44 actions that were assigned to RECCo, which meant that we had a lot of work to do. So from that point, we created the energy theft reduction programme. We turned all the actions into what we call EPICs and added those into our RECCo change backlog. So we looked at the EPICs that were in the change backlog. We went through and we prioritised those EPICs using the Moscow method. So we must do something about this. The should haves. So we really should do something about this. The could haves, this is something we could do, or the would like to. So we prioritised them using that methodology. And there were some must have things that we could just get on and do, so we didn't need a project to deliver it. So that's things like we talked about ETTOS, the Energy Theft Reduction Expert Group, and that's been up and running since March, and the Energy Theft Reduction Forum, which is why we're all here today. So we got on and delivered those. As you can see from this slide, there's a number of other EPICs that are in progress. So if something required a project to start, then we followed our internal RECCo project governance methodology there to prioritise and authorise the start of those projects. So they needed a project brief, which is taken to our change approval board, and if the change approval board approves the project brief, then that project is initiated. And as you can see from this, something like the raising awareness of energy theft for consumers, that's a project that is in progress. And something like obtain the smart meter data that's relevant to energy theft, that's in progress as well. So I'll just move through those. And you can see from here there are another number of EPICs that are either currently in progress or they're on our RECCo backlog. That doesn't mean that they won't be started. It means that they have been prioritised to start at a future point. So in a minute, I'll move on to show you what that looks like when we look at the plan on a page for this programme and how that looks for the, well, we've got an 18-month window that we're showing currently, but we are looking at a wider view of that at the moment. And hopefully in a future forum, I'll be able to share that with you and we can talk about a sort of multi-year view of what this programme is going to look like. Currently have 7 projects in flight at the moment. So we've got quite a number of projects that are obviously looking to deliver in the current financial year. So this is an 18-month view of the programme starting in October last year, which as John referred to was when we were creating the theft estimation methodology and going through that process. And alongside that, we did the ASE event that we've all talked about and where a lot of these actions have come from. So as you can see on this slide here, we've got energy theft end-to-end process mapping. That's one of our key projects at the moment. And I do have a request for everyone who's on this call that if you do have any processes or any documentation that you are able to share with us that would help us understand the energy theft end-to-end process and what your organisation does regarding energy theft, if you could send that in via the email address. I think Ros will be sharing that with you soon. I think it comes up on other future slides, but the technical services, I think, energy email address, if you could share them via that with us, or if you're willing to sort of engage with us and have a conversation, want to have a meeting to discuss any of that, then please do get in touch, as that's a in-flight project that we're working on at the moment. And the more information we can get from everyone to help build that picture, the more effective and useful it will be for the other projects in this programme of work. As you can see there, there's a big dependency between that and our energy theft awareness strategy. We want to understand what the end-to-end process is and perhaps where there might be some gaps that we want to fill and how we can fill those. And again, you can see other things that are going on at the moment, such as the incentive schemes review, social media monitoring, and future projects such as the police task force project, which I think we're going to come on and talk about some of that in future slides. So thank you. That's everything from me. now. So I think I'm handing over to Annette now.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, John. So I believe Annette is on the call and she will be sharing the slides.
Certainly, yeah. Now, do I need you to unshare for me to be able to share? Thank you. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Superb. So many of you may already know me because I'm sure a lot of us have met before. I'm Annette Boyson and I'm the Energy Theft Tip-Off Service account manager at Crime Stoppers. And I've been looking after the account and the service since January 2020. So 3.5 years down the line, I've seen it evolve, change and grow. And I'll talk you through a number of facets of the service. Sorry, I hesitate because I pressed down and it's not moved. So bear with me a moment. There we go. So as I say, I'm going to talk about a number of facets of the Energy Theft Tip-Off Service as we go through today's presentation. And I'll also give you a bit of an overview of the Stay Energy Safe marketing that we carry out to underpin the service, and then a couple of updates. So just to give you a quick introduction to Crime Stoppers, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're an independent charity and we give people the power to speak up to stop crime 100% anonymously, always. We're here because there are many people out in the communities that don't feel that they can speak to the police without fear of repercussion. So they can speak to us with the peace of mind that they'll never get asked who they are and we will never pass on their information. And we instill this by scrambling telephone numbers and IP addresses so that we can't even try and track back a phone call or an online form to find out who has contacted us. And even when the police ask for us to disclose this information because of the complete anonymity of our service, we cannot do so. So we're here for 3 reasons primarily. And just to reflect what John was saying a moment ago, it's to deter crime, stop people from doing it in the first place, to try and reduce it, to make it too risky to commit a crime, and then to detect it. And obviously in the case of ETTOS and the Stay Energy Safe activity, that helps you to respond to energy theft and identify it, and then obviously take the relevant action. We take information as a charity 24/7, 365 days a year for our core charity service as well as our commercial partners. We take over 600,000 contacts every year, and we haven't broken our anonymity guarantee for over 35 years since we were established. Currently, the split of contacts is 25% contact us by phone, 75% via online form, which the way technology is going isn't really a surprise. Many people obviously use their laptops, their tablets, their phones in order to contact us. The Energy Theft Tip-Off Service empowers people to tell us what they know. The service consists of a number of different components. So there's the Crime Stoppers information sharing. That's information that comes in through the Crime Stoppers 555 number or the online form organically. It may be around another crime, but people may also suspect that in conjunction with that crime, there is energy theft going on. So that information is then passed on to the relevant energy partner. Then there's a dedicated telephone number, a unique online reporting form, and of course the specific Stay Energy Safe website. So when people contact Crime Stoppers, and the process is exactly the same if they contact Stay Energy Safe, they'll either ring us or they'll fill in an online form. Then once that information has either been written down by the call agent during the conversation or received via an online form, they check the details and sanitize it to remove any identifying features. So for example, if someone's rung up and said, I want to talk about my neighbour or I want to talk about my cousin, then any information like that is removed. We ensure that the report still is a fully rounded report and can provide the information needed by the partner that's going to receive it, so that they can obviously action it when they receive it. For Stay Energy Safe, we then look at a matching process. So we use ETTOS and we use Find My Supplier to match it up with the relevant gas and electricity supplier. If we're unable to do that, then we'll either contact ExoServe or the DNO to help us do that, and then we will then disseminate it securely to the relevant party. And again, 25 hours a day. Be impressive. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, when you receive Crime Stoppers information, which I know is a small portion of the amount of information you get, but when you receive Crime Stoppers information, you will see that on the PDF that you get, there's a keep in touch section. And if someone has agreed to keep in touch, then you have the ability to respond to that piece of information and ask additional questions should you want to. So the process for that, and there is a process on each of those two-way forms, or sorry, keep in touch forms, we've just renamed them. You can email csi@555.org.uk. Then you put the ISR number, which is the unique reference number for that report, into the subject line. Please don't ever attach the PDF, because then that's not secure. Then you can ask the questions you wish to ask in the body of the email, and that will then come back to us as our call centre. Those questions will be loaded onto a web portal, relying on the people that have agreed to this keep in touch option to log back in and answer those questions. So you have 14 days to do that. Of course, I always say the quicker you can do that, the better, because human nature says they might log back in the first day, they might log back in on the second day, they might third or fourth, and then if they haven't seen anything, they're less and less likely to log back in and have a look to see if you've asked any questions. So if it's something you'd be interested in doing and you see it on the form, then act as quickly as you can, but it might just help you get some additional information that you need to make that energy theft identification. So moving on to Stay Energy Safe. Stay Energy Safe is the public-facing brand of the energy theft tip-off service. And we developed this to engage with energy customers across the country. Stay Energy Safe gains traction, it gives them a reason to care. And obviously within the messaging that we put out, we alert people to the dangers and obviously encourage them to tell us where they suspect energy theft is happening. But the safety of their loved ones is primary. If they feel that their loved ones or their friends, their community might be in danger, then they're more likely to pick up the telephone and tell us what they know. So to support the energy theft tip-off service, we run ongoing activity all across the year, and that includes activity on Google, through social media. We've also run successful radio campaigns out of home, and we have a consistent drip feed effect where we're constantly talking about energy theft, the dangers, the signs to spot, all of those really key messages that help to raise awareness, help to educate people around the dangers of it, why they shouldn't do it, because it obviously over the last few months has been exceedingly tempting for people to try and reduce their energy bills. And all of these messages come together along with why it's important to report it, to give a really holistic overview of energy theft. And again, that is around awareness, education, deterrent and identification. And really the end goal is to deter someone from committing energy theft in the first place, which is really the place we'd all like to be, or it's to get them to pick up the phone or fill in an online form so that we can pass on to you where there is a suspicion of energy theft occurring. And again, that enables you to go out and look into the situation. Now I'm going to try something here. I won't play all of them to you in the interests of time. Aisha, if you are able to see this, will you put your hand up, because you're the only one I can see on the screen at the moment. If it doesn't play, if you just I don't know whether there's some thumbs down. I'll stop it and I'll ensure it's shared with you afterwards so that you can watch both the videos, listen to the radio audio, and then we've also got some social media assets. But I'll play this one and hope it works.
Okay, it's showing, but there's no sound.
Yes, I had a feeling that was the case. Right, okay, we'll shelve that then, and hopefully, thank you for that, Aisha. We'll share this with you afterwards and you'll be able to access all of these assets. Now, if I hit down, it's going to carry on playing, isn't it? Right, come on. Right, so those were a couple of videos we've created. They've been put out on YouTube. They've been promoted on the Stay Energy Safe website, and they've been promoted through both Google and social media. And the radio audio that you will get to hear has been promoted in the northeast, northwest, southeast and southwest in various phases of pilots. So all of those assets are there and ready to go should we wish to do anything with them further. And then social media, we mix up the messages so that we have something different and something fresh going out on a regular basis. That is really to encourage engagement, to keep people interested, to keep people clicking through to the website, and really to raise awareness, and again, so that people can spot the signs, understand the dangers and tell us what they know. So again, I'll let you watch these in real time when you get the presentation. So we're soon to launch our updated partner section on the Stay Energy Safe website. It's always been there, and we've reassessed it and revamped it to make it easier to use so you can find what you want more easily. And we are now looking to upload far more assets than it's ever had before. So we are looking to upload all of the TikTok assets, all of the unknown danger assets, and then a lot of the individual social media assets, along with social media schedules. This will enable you to go onto the partner portal on the Stay Energy Safe site, log in and download any of those assets for use when you're talking to your customers about energy theft. So as soon as that is ready to go, I'm sure between myself and Aisha, we'll make sure we get the message out and we'll let you know how you can get yourself a login in order to access those materials. So watch this space on that one. Then just really to give you an outline of the success of ETTOS to date. So since we launched it in September 2016, we've seen year-on-year growth. These figures start from 2017 because it was the first full year of service. So it's 12 months compared to 12 months. So as you can see, on a year-on-year basis, the number of contacts received has grown, and so in turn has the number of reports received. I've forecast 2023 on the basis of the actuals achieved in April and May so far this year, which you can see in that lower line on the bottom of the table. What is really positive also, as we have evolved the partnership and as we've evolved the marketing, the conversion rates of the number of people ringing us or filling in an online form to actionable reports has gone up and up and up, and we're currently at around 71 to 72% conversion on the Stay Energy Safe service, which is a really high conversion from contact to report. So that's a really positive story for ETTOS. And this really just shows you in a slightly more visual way that growth between the number of contacts received and the number of reports received. But it's continued to be a very, very positive picture with year-on-year growth. So obviously helping our energy partners identify energy theft across the country. And that's it for me. I will stop sharing and I will let you go back to your bigger deck that I nearly broke.
Thank you so much, Annette. If you could just stick around until after the next session for the Q&As, just in case there's anything for you. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks.
Okay, and now we have Roz for the smart data information.
Hey everyone. Hi, I'm going to tell you today about some work which is currently underway looking at smart meter data in theft detection. So if we just move on to the next slide. So RECCo has initiated a project to explore the feasibility of using smart meter data to improve the assumptions and data behind the theft estimation model. The intention is to obtain smart alerts and backtest these against confirmed thefts. So to look for patterns in smart alerts that precede confirmed thefts, but are not seen to the same extent for metering systems where there is no confirmed theft. This backtest will determine which, if any, smart meter alerts are correlated to instances of energy theft and could be used to better predict and detect energy theft in the future. In terms of the work that has been completed so far, the alerts which are available from smart meters have been analysed and alerts which have potential relevance to energy theft have been identified. Engagement has been had with DCC and other market participants to understand what data is available and how it might be obtained. A consultation was issued to industry market participants to understand the smart data they are using and any potential issues in using it. And we've also looked at the pathway for RECCo gaining smart meter data on an enduring basis. So subject to the findings of the backtest, longer term access to the data would potentially be sought. So if we just move to the next slide. So for these next few slides, I'm going to go through some of the findings of the work that's been done so far. Firstly, data availability. To do the backtest will require MPX level data, as it needs to be possible to map the alerts to specific metering systems where there are confirmed thefts. Historic data from DCC is available at MPXN level. However, DCC are not able to share it with RECCo without additional authorization, and this either needs to be provided by individual organisations such as suppliers or DNOs, or if it was for the market-wide, then by Ofgem. Discussions have also been held with 3 REC parties that hold historic data themselves, which could potentially be shared with RECCo at the required granularity. Data privacy impact assessments need to be completed with relevant sharing agreements put in place before any data could be shared. In terms of which smart alerts are potentially of relevance, a number have been identified, and these are displayed on the table on screen there. So for instance, we have unauthorised physical access, meter cover removed, and supply outage restored, outage greater than or equal to 3 minutes. If we go to the next slide. I mentioned that a consultation had been issued to industry participants. There were 13 responses received, and just to pull out some points of notes from those consultation responses, suppliers and DNOs, gas transporters, do not have access to all of the same alert types, leading to approaches to theft management that can differ. It was suggested that DNOs would benefit from the ability to view consumption on an MPAN by MPAN basis and would enable them to make improvements to their theft management activities if this data were to be made available. The consultation respondents indicated that using smart alert data is manual and time consuming due to false positives being needing to be filtered out, and I've got a few examples of that coming up. Responses also indicated that there's a lack of clarity across the industry regarding the triggers for many types of alert, and that's hampering theft management activities, and in some cases these alerts are not being used. And finally, using smart alerts on their own does not necessarily provide a reliable indicator of energy theft due to the large volume and spurious nature of why some alerts are generated. Therefore, it was suggested that additional data flows and other property and consumption information is required to complement the smart data. So if we just move on to the next slide, I've got a few examples here that have been pulled out from the consultation responses. So these are some of the So looking first at the spurious alerts, we've got an example where 1 meter generated more than 3,000 strong magnetic field removed alerts over approximately 1 week. a site visit was conducted which determined the alert was being caused by the magnets holding the meter box covered closed. Another example provided in the consultation was that one meter generated a large number of tamper alerts, which after investigation was found to be caused by a nearby light being switched on. And finally, one consultation respondent noted that around 90%, so around 11.5 million of the alerts they received in 2022 were from the meters of a single manufacturer. Moving to the table below that, so to help filter out some of those spurious alerts there, it's been identified that other data sources could potentially be useful because the smart alerts on their own will not necessarily provide a reliable indicator of energy theft. This table shows some potential other industry data flows that could be used alongside the smart alert data in the backtesting to help filter out those spurious alerts. For example, if you know that a site visit is occurring, that could help filter out alerts generated by that site visit. If we move on to the next slide. So in terms of next steps, based on the findings of the work that's been done thus far, RECCo intend to proceed with data requests to obtain historic smart alert data to conduct back testing against those confirmed thefts which it holds. 3 RECC parties and Smart DCC are being engaged with in terms of obtaining this data. There's also been a couple of other actions identified from the consultation responses. So firstly, exploring the potential to gain access to other data flows to complement that smart alert data in the backtest, and engaging with CCAS regarding the feasibility to develop additional guidance and educational material related to the smart alerts, including what scenarios, including scenarios when alerts will be generated and clarification on the meaning of alerts. And finally, I have an action point for yourselves as attendees. If your organisation could potentially share smart meter data with RECCo for its backtesting against the confirmed theft data, subject to the appropriate GDPR controls being put in place, please let us know via the technical inquiries at reccmanager.co.uk email address. So I've popped that in the meeting chat earlier. So we're not asking you to put your hand up in the meeting here, but please do email us if you could potentially be involved in that backtesting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for that, Roz. Okay, so now we have entered the first Q&A session. So if you would like to ask any questions, please either raise your hand or enter your questions in the chat. I can see that Steve has asked a few questions already, so we'll start with those. So this is for John. Steve has asked if, John, you referred to RECCo engaging publicly with, example, the media. How do you see that working?
Yeah, afternoon. So the contact we've had, particularly with the media today, has been more reactive. So whenever a journalist is intended to run a story on something related, we sometimes get asked for comments, etc. And I think that's been the case historically as well. UK RPA, I don't know if there's anyone from UK RPA online, but they occasionally get asked for comments and those kind of things. So we've done our best to inform journalists of the actual position and make sure we're keeping things factually accurate, etc. What we do want to do is make sure that we have more of a proactive approach to this going forward. So once we've initiated some of the epics around awareness and particularly the kind of messaging that we do want to convey more widely, we'll be putting together some wider packs, and I think that might include some media packs of things that we do want to raise particular awareness of, to overuse the word. I think we also want to contact external agencies and make sure they're aware of this problem. In part, that's because we found out through issuing some freedom of information requests last year to try and inform our work on this that there isn't a common understanding of the problem of energy theft. There isn't common reporting of incidents such as electrocutions or fires that may have been caused by meter tampering, etc. So hopefully, if we can make those kind of bodies aware of what we're trying to do and the collective efforts that are needed to try and improve safety in this aspect, potentially standardise the reporting, then hopefully we can make vast improvements in this area. So there'll be a wide range of things. So I think it's fair to say that we're very early stages of this development, but it will be one of those particular projects that we picked out earlier as an epic. In terms of the epics themselves, then yes, they should be transparent. I haven't got a problem if we want to post them on the RECCo website, and I think it'd be sensible that we provide some more transparency around dashboards of each of the projects as well and the progress that's being made against them. So yeah, I'm happy to update the theft area of the RECCo website following this forum, and we'll issue a communication just to point everyone in the right direction of where those epics are listed, etc. I haven't got a problem with that. Do you want to scroll through the others, Aisha? Not all for me, I appreciate it.
So yeah, so the next one I think might be a joint one between RECCo and ETTOS. So it's, can we identify or map reports to actual theft?
Do you want to pick that one up, Ines?
I can pick it up from the report angle. Yes, absolutely, we can map reports. And when I say that, that is the postcode of the property that is suspected to have energy theft occurring within it. Actual theft from a Crime Stoppers point of view, we don't have that information because we obviously don't get that feedback. So how that would be mapped against it, I don't know. I think, I'm not talking out of turn, that RECCo are looking at that. But obviously that is a case of collating industry data with regards to the thefts that have been identified to try and match that back.
Yeah, that's fair comment. Again, it's one of the things that once we've identified the different sources of data and we're able to procure it, we want to be able to turn that into some useful insights that we can relay back to RECC parties and other stakeholders. So providing some heat mapping, for instance, is certainly one of the things we're looking into. Whether or not we'll be able to identify the individual cases of theft is something we'll need to consider, because there's obviously sensitivities around some of this data, but certainly heat mapping is something we can provide and hopefully help inform where kind of field forces should be targeted and those kind of issues. But yeah, that's all part and parcel of the work for the coming programme.
Okay, thank you. And I think Glenn has his hand up.
Thanks, Aisha. Yeah, Glenn Shearn, I'm chair of the UK RPA. Just wanted to first off on the media, the question from Steve, just back up what John said. In the past, we've worked really collaboratively with both RECCo and Crime Stoppers to make sure we've got joint communications, and we're on the same page with the same data. So when we do have those inquiries, that they work, and we're giving a united message, and we're always keen to continue that good relationship. But my question was just around, obviously the tip-off lines are great and great guns with Crime Stoppers at the moment, and obviously UK RPA have a similar one that runs and also runs across Northern Ireland, which Crime Stoppers one doesn't at the moment. But we're keen to be able to share that data, that we're not giving duplicate reports to people, or if we are, to make sure, whether what patterns we can see from that. Our RECCo on board with maybe exploring how we can do that. We know there might be some difficulties initially, but how we can make sure that we're giving a service that across the industry that doesn't duplicate and all looks for patterns between the data that we're both getting. I don't know, that's probably for John again. Sorry, John.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can pick up with you, Glenn. I think the more, one of the things I didn't say in my introduction is that in order for this theft reduction strategy to work, it has to be seen as an industry-wide strategy. It definitely relies very heavily on close collaboration, not just with those on this call, but potentially a wider set of agencies and stakeholders, as I touched upon earlier. So very much we've got to make sure that we pool our resources and target them effectively. And I think the sharing of data is a good example, and certainly making sure there's an avoidance of any duplication of reports that might come in, because I think that would hamper efforts. So yeah, more than happy to kind of pick up on how we can more closely align the reports that you're receiving directly through UK RPA with those that Crime Stoppers receive, and potentially those that are going in directly to suppliers and distributors and GTs, etc. Because obviously those tip-off services are important, but they're only one potential means of finding out that there's potential theft happening. So yeah, I think the more we can triangulate data and help improve the quality, if you like, of those leads, the better.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions on the previous topics? Jennifer?
Yeah, it was really to do with the second part when you're looking at other data sources. I'm just thinking from a power point of view, are you sort of liaising with market-wide half-hourly over the changes that are potentially coming into how that data is communicated between parties and where the sources are going to be? Because a lot of the DTC data flows are either changing or will be going through the DIP via the Alexon process now, rather than coming directly from MOPS and DCs where we got them from previously, and just conscious of building something which then we'd have to rebuild in like 24 months time or whatever when all those data flows change over. Or potentially, if you've got it in, it may be something that could be automated as part of that implementation.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So we're obviously doing work with the MHHS program as well. So we're hopefully aligned in terms of the future developments. I think it's fair to say that we haven't yet given any thought to whether or not the changes that will be made and the introduction of the DIP provide an additional data source, but that's certainly something we'll pick up going forward. We have had some engagement with the program on whether or not there's going to be any impacts of the shortening of the settlement window, etc., and those kind of things. So we are trying to join the dots together between the program and what we're doing on the theft reduction strategy. But yeah, it's a very good point to give some consideration to those potentially new data sources.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have any more questions? Please feel free to pop them in the chat if you don't want to say them out loud.
There's one just coming from Steve on media statements in the chat. Will any media statements be run via the expert group to ensure it's subject to peer review, recognising its sensitivity?
I think, John, just recognising we've all had instances where we've had the press, especially when a building's blown up or something, and the need for careful consideration of any statements that are made. So I think there's sort of general theft related communications where you have an opportunity to consider them before issuing them, and that I just wonder whether you're sort of going to use that expert group to peer review it, and presumably you're not intending to sort of get involved in those, the factory blew up, are you willing to comment on?
It's a good point. I think I don't think we'd ever want to get drawn into speculation as to why an explosion or a fire might have happened, etc. And it'd be, as I say, entirely speculative until any kind of investigation is concluded, etc. What we're aiming to do, though, is make sure that there's material that anybody in the industry could readily refer to. So there's kind of a single version of the truth, if you like, and we're making sure that there's consistent messaging, it's all fact-based, it's all evidenced, and that we can inform wider stakeholders as well as we can. So having established that expert group, then yeah, it'd be very sensible for us to run any proactive communications past them. And I think essentially if we can produce a robust enough pack and it's quality enough, then we can refer ad hoc media inquiries to those kind of lines that have already been developed. We certainly don't anticipate being kind of vox popped on 10 o'clock news or whatever it might be. And I certainly wouldn't expect us to ever comment on any kind of occurring incident that's still in the news, because say it's very, as we identified through the freedom of information requests that we put in, it's very difficult to identify whether or not something is actually a result of meat tampering or something else. Yeah, we do need to be careful not to be sensationalist. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Do we have anything else? No? Can't see anything else coming on the chat. Okay. Well, we are actually going to take a 5-minute break now. So you can just grab yourself a refreshment and come back ready for the second half of the session, where we're hoping that we'll get loads of engagement from you all. So if you could be back here at 2 o'clock, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, that was a quick 5 minutes. Hopefully everyone is back. Steve, are you there on the call? I've just seen that you've got a question for Roz.
I am, but it was just it was a point for consideration. I think, Rosalind, you'd still have to apply the test you're doing in SMART. It'll need to be a combination of tests in a similar fashion, because the tamper alert is disconnection of the AMR device from the meter, which could occur as a result of maintenance. So you need a similar thing, which you're already spotted. You know, these codes in and of themselves can be misleading unless you combine them with other factors. But it's just one for consideration. It's more relevant in the non-domestic sector where SMART aren't prevalent.
It's an interesting point. I don't think it has been considered, but I will take it away and add it to the list of areas being looked at, subject to being able to obtain data, obviously. Okay, thanks for just suggesting that.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Roz. Okay, so moving on to the next section for police engagement with Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, if you'd like to move on to the next slide. Thank you. So in previous discussion forums, such as the ASC workshop in November last year and UK RPA session, the issue of police engagement and support is a topic that's often been raised. RECCo want to work collaboratively to empower parties to take action and understand gaps and obstacles in current processes, with an aim to improve areas which may not be working quite as well as they could. Superintendent Patrick Holdway from the City of London Police, the leader of the National Business Crime Centre, is also on the call with us today. Patrick, feel free to comment or jump in with anything you wish to add at any point. And today we're going to focus on 4 areas: so information exchange, warrant execution support, prosecutions, and processes and guidance. There will be a poll question on each area, and then we'll have some time to go over any ideas and solutions you may have. So first area, information exchange. I've detailed here some considerations. It's not exhaustive, but hopefully covers the key points. So what information do REC parties and the police share with each other? Is it shared when needed, and are both able to obtain the information they need easily? What are the mechanisms for sharing information? With over 40 different police forces and many different suppliers and network operators, is consistency a problem in sharing information? So the first question for everybody is, are you able to get the information you need from the police to facilitate your energy theft investigations? So if the question is relevant to activities your organisation carries out, please can you pick the answer that best fits your experiences? It should be appearing on your screens now. I can see the responses are going up, so I'll give you all a bit more time to answer. It looks like the leading answer is sometimes depends on which police force or the individual. Got 24 responses in. I think stayed as it has for a little while now. 25. Last chance to submit an answer. Okay, so looking at that, 48% say sometimes depends on which police force or the individual. Next highest is 28% no, in most instances unable to get the info I need. And 16% yes, I'm normally able to get the info I need, which is good news. And 8% yes, but it takes a long time, I only get partial info. And none have said yes, but they've been asked to pay a fee, which is interesting because we have heard some reports of that, I think also by the UK RPA. So on light of those responses, is there anybody who wants to comment or elaborate on anything they've answered there? When you're saying sometimes depends on which police force or the individual, is that by frequency? Patrick, you've joined us.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm here, so I'm not hiding. Although if it would have been many that said they'd asked to pay, I might have dropped off the call because that would have been a bit awkward, wouldn't it? If I can just explain from my perspective, you should get information. So under the victim's code, if you are shown as the victim, you should get the information. I'm surprised. I'd be surprised if you don't get the information. If you don't, it's probably a loss. Something's been lost in translation as to what the relevance is that you're asking for that information. I'll just throw that out there. But I know the couple of people have come back with some queries.
Thank you, Patrick. Jane, hand raised.
Hi. We have had an instance, Patrick, where we were asked to pay.
Really?
So don't leave though. Definitely need your input.
Yes.
So I think it's probably a common experience that we are all obviously dealing with limited resources and budgets, and that's obviously true for the police as much as, you know, any organisation. So the key to sort of getting that level of engagement to support you either with support on site or post visit activity, you know, to deal with cannabis farms or any other form of situation we come across, is about that engagement at a local level, building those networks, building those relationships. So I think you're right, Patrick, there is a piece there around potentially the understanding of what was being asked for, which is, you know, one of the things that we're sort of focusing quite heavily on in terms of those relationships and building those networks.
There is, Jen, I don't know if it's the same one. There was an incident I was aware of. So there is a National Police Chiefs Council document which sets out when they can charge, and it's for disclosure of information, which is very different than you wanting details in relation to a victim. And there was a case, I just chased it through, and I think the victim was shown as someone else, which is what caused the confusion. So yeah, I think if you're shown as the victim, then you should get the details of that information.
Right, thank you. That was it, Rebecca. Just
thank you both. Yeah. And anybody else have any views or comments before we move on to the next area? Jenny? Went down again.
Hang on, there we go. Better. Mute. I've not been doing energy theft all that long, but having looked through all our details handed over from previous people, I actually don't have any information about how to contact police to get information, which means I'm relying on police services to reach out to me and say, oh, we've been to this site and there was some energy theft, which I find obviously doesn't happen. So yeah, I wouldn't know where to even start with that. It's not something we've got information for. So could something be put together to make it a bit easier, like to reach out to the right people in the first place?
So Jenny, from my perspective, I think if a police officer turns up, they won't know at all whether there's energy theft, or even if there is, who they then reach out and speak to. I think the question, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, was more about where you have reported an incident. Then to progress investigation, you then know the officer who you need to speak to. But I mean, what you say is a good challenge, but I suspect the police wouldn't know who to speak to in the first instance to be able to report it.
Yeah, I accept that. Yeah, it's going to be just as equally difficult. It's going to be difficult for them. But yeah, it's more about if I then come across a situation, customer calls me up and goes, oh, the police have been to my site, I'm the landlord, etc., and I wanted to get some details of that case or whatever, and that doesn't count whether I was whether we have to pay or not. Either way, like who I'd have to reach out to get that.
In those circumstances, my request would be that the victim, whoever that is, reports the crime to the police. So they would then record that incident as them being the victim. That victim should then be accessing information when they need it. It will certainly be given under the victim's code. There's certain bits we have to keep the victim up to date with, bits of information. So that should help facilitate that. But it will be limited to the victim. So if someone else reported it and you phoned up, you wouldn't get, because the data protection rules, we just wouldn't be able to share that information. That can be some of the challenges. So I think from a business perspective, it's useful to have that, that useful single point of contact, or at least somebody that's recorded that the police can go back to with a bit of confidence.
Patrick, I think you make a good point. It's not just suppliers knowing who to contact and get information from the police. It's the other way as well, isn't it? If you want to contact a supplier about an incident, it's who do you go to? Where do you get the information from as well? So yeah, it's that exchange of information both ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Can we move on to the next slide? So the next area is warrant execution support. So again, I've detailed into consideration. What is the process? Or is there a process to request police support? Is it the same nationwide, and does it work? What are the police actually able to do to support warrant execution? What are realistic expectations, and what can't they do? And what happens when support is not available, and how often is this? Does it mean energy theft goes unresolved, or are there safety issues? And when support isn't available, why is that? Is it purely due to resources, or is knowledge and awareness of energy theft as a crime an issue that contributes to it? And is there enough guidance about what should happen when executions available for both RECC parties and the police? So, second question is, are you able to get police support when needed for energy theft warrant executions? Philip, you have a hand up. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, some of the problems that we have, particularly with warrants, I appreciate when we're calling ad hoc and we're on the job, and maybe it's a not today thing and we have to rearrange to go back. I think some of the things that are very prominent for us at the moment is particularly in the case of road meters. And there's things in the regulations such as dishonestly obtaining services. It comes under the Fraud Act and the Theft Act. We struggle to get the support we need sometimes, particularly with Freeman of the Land Magna Carta customers. There's sometimes difficulty in understanding from the police officer's perspective what their responsibility is to support us when that crime has taken place. I thought both of those were substantial laws that are being broken. And then the third thing that typically happens there is obstruction of the warrant, obstructing us entering the premises to inspect our equipment, which may be dangerous, not stamped, not a correct measurement for device, effectively unmetered because they've removed our meter and put their own meter in without authorization. And that is a real difficult area for us. And in the time while we're waiting to try and get some authorization or support to resolve those jobs, anything could happen, be it an explosion, electrocution, a fire, etc. So yeah, we struggle with support in those cases for sure.
So are you yourself, sometimes it depends on when and where sort of answer, would you say that sometimes you can get support, but
sometimes we can get support there and then, and we appreciate that. And when it does happen, sometimes it's just unclear what laws have been broken to the officers that might attend site. So they might not feel they can support us. And one of the things that I'd really like to see is on the NVC website is some guidance there that maybe the police could refer to that says, yeah, this law has been broken. It is covered under the Theft Act. It is covered under the Fraud Act. They are dishonestly obtaining services. It is dangerous and a clear and present danger to everybody else. And I think as a point of reference, that would be really useful, I think, to support police officers who do assist us on these jobs, so that they know that, yeah, this is legit and support is required to enable us access, hopefully peaceful access, to undertake our work. And then what kind of aligns in with that is, the obstructing of the warrant. I mean, what's the point in having a warrant if we can't execute it?
Patrick, I know this is an area you've been looking into with the UK RPAs. Is there anything you want to add at this point?
Yeah, it's not all great news, I'm afraid. So what I did, this has come up at a couple of occasions with yourselves and also UK RPA. So I went away and got some legal advice from police in relation to this, and it was kind of centred on two questions really. One was around the warrants part. What role do the police play? The advice I got is pretty much, if you want police to be in attendance at a warrant at your application, you should request it. So what we want to avoid is you, I'd use that generally as a term, asking, have we got a warrant, can police come up and support it? I think so. What they're saying is, so when you make that application, if you feel that police are needed, is to make that application at the point of your warrant. So actually the police are recorded on the warrant, because the powers to execute that warrant aren't given to police. They are for you under the powers of the Act. I mean, the challenge I make when you look at some of the legislation, Gas Electricity Board Act 1954, 86 Act, you know, some of these are quite old bits of legislation, and I think the world's kind of moved on a little bit, because the next challenge is in relation to the so section 28(4) of the Gas Act makes it an offence to obstruct an employee of an energy company exercising their powers. The challenge is that the that is what we call a summary offence. So we get summary offences and indictable offences. If it's a summary only offence, we have no power of entry. So if they say we're not going to let you in and they shut the door, we are powerless because of the level of the offence to force entry, to detain them, to arrest them. So we get that bit of an impasse because the powers just don't allow us to do it. The next bit when I looked at was around section 17. So section 17 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act gives us the power to enter a property for the purposes of saving life or limb. And I know there have been occasions where police, and no doubt justifiably, have been told this meter is going to cause some problems and real at risk, and police will force entry to be able to do that and get into it. Again, the legal advice on that is actually the burden of proof in relation to using section 17 is actually quite high. It's you know, there is quite a high threshold, to the point that for us to do it, what we're relying on is the fact that there's a gas explosion, something is likely to follow if entry is not forced. So it's a higher level than perhaps what police have been used to. So I suspect this probably isn't kind of what you want to hear. So we've got this advice recently. I've reached out to colleagues across RECCo and UK RPA just to update them, knowing this event was going to come up, so I wanted to talk about it. But I will be sharing this with police forces in the next couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, to make them aware of it, because clearly it's a legal status. We've got legal advice from the police, and clearly we're duty bound to kind of share that. I suspect it might show gaps in the process of the warrant, given, as I say, the legislation is quite old and the world's moved on, and the need to deal with this is a lot higher than probably what it was then. So, but yeah, happy for any questions or queries in relation to that.
So the point that you made about the wording of the warrant or the police presence requested due to it being a summary offence and not an indictable offence, we can request a different type of warrant. Is that what you're saying?
No, so there's two elements. So when you apply for a warrant, if you feel that police need to be attended, to make that the application of the warrant to say you want police to be in attendance, is the first bit. If we, separate to that, if we turn up, if the people are obstructive and won't let you execute the warrant, if they've gone into the house and shut the door, because of the nature of the offence, we have no powers to force entry to allow that warrant to take place to deal with those people. The level of the offence of stopping someone execute that warrant is a low level offence, which limits the powers that we can utilise.
So it leaves us in the position where, in those scenarios where the only choice we're left with is digging up the supply in the street and disconnecting them, which is not ideal.
No, I don't disagree, and which is why I think the comment is more about it probably exposes some gaps in the legislation as much as anything else.
Yeah. And I think that's useful to understand where the gaps and the obstacles are, so we can actually have meaningful discussion about how to move forward and to resolve some of those issues. And I have someone from Utility Warehouse with their hand up.
Hello. Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, can hear you.
Hi. I think some of the issues that we have with regards to that is, one, when we're applying for a warrant, we're not always going to know that police are going to be required before we attend. Granted, when customers are barricading themselves in the property and preventing us from executing the warrant, we might ask you guys to come out. In terms of it being a low level offence, I mean, the concern for us is where there are health and safety concerns involved. For example, with the gas meter that exploded back a few months ago, those are the type of things that we are trying to prevent from happening. So in the event that we're trying to gain access and the customer is not allowing that, and the tamper that they've got in place could potentially be a risk to themselves and the surrounding area, how do we then move forward from that?
So no, thanks for that. So I mean, first of all, I don't think it's a low level offence. That's the legislation. A summary only offence is deemed to be a low level offence. So for instance, a summary only offence is an offence that we've got to deal with within 6 months. Others at times out can only be heard at magistrates court. So that's the kind of level. It's quite a low level in terms of the legislation. I don't disagree with you in terms of your concerns around it, and I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that is a real risk. What you will need to do is convince the officers at the scene that the risk is such that they need to use their power of entry under PACE, Criminal Evidence Act, to force entry because you think something is imminent. But you're going to have to make that, you know, officers, we would never force officers to do something. It's because they clearly carry the burden themselves. They make that legislation, you know, that decision at the time. So you kind of have to make that decision at the time based upon the evidence you've got. And of course, clearly that will vary massively. The information you've got will be very different for individual households.
Okay. Thank you. Steve.
Sorry, I was just going to say.
We are running short of time, so if we can, if you have last question on this, we'll move on to the next area.
Sorry, yeah, the guidance you got, did you say you were sharing that with RECCo and UK RPA?
No, I've got to share it with police, unfortunately, because it's a legal privilege. I can't share it, unfortunately, externally.
No, that's fine. It's just obviously if we start saying, well, the test is high, how do you then that then puts the officer in a difficult position, because it implies that they have to test it at a high level. But when you're at the property, you can't possibly know the conditions in the property. But what you do know is that somebody who wasn't competent has undertaken a connection or tampered with the meter, and that in principle is an unsafe activity, because that's why we have people who are competent to do work. So how would the imminent test is a difficult one. So you go away and 2 hours later the site blows up and people are killed, then who's negligent and eligible? Because we've had cases in the past, I think, of the dance studio scenario where the directors of that company were hauled before the courts in terms of liability. It just seems quite almost a backward step, doesn't it? Because what we're trying to do here is protect people ultimately, and certainly with gas, it's not just the people who are committing the offence that get blown up; it's all their neighbours as well. Yeah. So it does create, it's a real challenge, isn't it?
It is. But conversely, the danger is that we just. Conversely, I'm not saying this, Steve, but conversely, we won't bother getting a warrant. We'll turn up, we'll try and get the address, we'll phone the police and say it's really dodgy. Please use your powers under the Police Equivalent Evidence Act, which is designed for a very specific set of purposes to gain entry. I think it's a gap in the legislation for exactly the reasons you said, because when it's designed, we probably didn't have this level of challenges around theft of fuel and theft of gas, electricity, and the technology that goes with it. You know, and James asked a question around what type of evidence we could ask for. It's finite, isn't it? Because it depends on what you turn up, the state of the property, how long it's been like here, what else other information you've got, what a form of evidence you've got. It does make it really difficult. And I think there is I suppose the other question is, whilst I can't share the evidence, I'm very happy to share the questions with RECCo.
Oh, yeah.
If they want to get their own evidence or their own legal advice to see if it's different in terms of using that as an evidence base to say this is what we think it is, and maybe between the two it does expose some legislation gaps that we can try and seek to try and close.
Thanks. If we move on to the next slide, and then we pick up any more questions on this in the next Q&A session. Okay. So next area is prosecutions. Let's have a look at some considerations for this. How often are RECC parties requested to complete statements? And are they completed to the required standard to enable prosecution? Is the necessary information and data being obtained during energy theft investigation? Is adequate physical and photographic evidence being collected, logged, and stored correctly? And is this evidence available to the police and CPS request? Are enough cases of suitable quality for prosecution reported to the police? And if so, are these then progressed to successful prosecution? And does current reporting give an accurate picture of the volume of prosecutions? As there's no distinct crime for theft of gas, do these get lost amongst other theft types? So the third question is, what is your view on prosecutions for energy theft? Select your response. Responses coming in. So it looks at the moment, 90% are not actively seeking prosecution. It's up to the police and CPS. 13% we seek prosecution, but cases are often not progressed. So it looks like we have a clear pattern there that the majority are not actively seeking prosecution. It could be useful to understand a little bit more why that is, but I am conscious of time, so we can move on to the next slide. Steve, have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I think just on that last slide, it's really important to get some context there, because we've experienced this scenario where we found energy theft, but generally where you find energy theft, there's other criminal activity being undertaken, and we found that our case for energy theft has been trumped by other sort of activity that the CPS think is more likely to be successful. So I think, and I don't know if others have had that experience, but that's certainly the context we have. So it's at where we sit on the stack to a certain
higher
extent.
charges move forward, and
exactly.
But there is the potential to lay multiple charges potentially. Steve.
Yeah, the experience we've had is that they tend to like to go with the one that they think has a higher chance of success, rather than pursuing multiple.
And want to move on to the next slide? So the last area to discuss is processes and guidance. We've touched on some of the feedback we've had so far. What process and guidance documents are there? Do the police have guidance documents? Does the energy industry have the guidance documents they need? Are any documents regional, or are they nationwide? Are they consistent? Who is responsible for them? And are they complete and up to date? And are they widely available and used? So the last question is, are there clear processes and guidance for engagement between RECC parties and the police? Okay, so we're quite quickly seeing that majority say no, process info and guidance is insufficient or does not exist. And it may be that there is some guidance there, but if people aren't aware of where it is and how to access it, then it may as well not exist. So 18% say some process info and guidance available, but more is needed. And 3% say yes, no additional process info and guidance is needed. So I think it's one response. So I think it's quite clearly indicated that process and guidance information is not really at the level that provides the information needed. And if we move on to the next slide, we can look at some ideas and solutions, hopefully from yourselves. So we've had a quick look at some of the areas of engagement with the police during an investigation, and I've mentioned some of the key considerations when looking at ways to better work together to empower parties to take action on energy theft. We'd like to hear from you about any ideas you may have around the areas discussed. So if you'd like to comment in chat or add a like if you see something you agree with that somebody else has posted, or feel free to raise your hand to discuss your idea. We may not have a chance to go through everything because our time is a bit limited, but we can take it away and have a look later.
Do you mind me just quickly butting in? I've just had a look at some policing data. So for this is for 3 quarters. This is for 9 months. The most recent data that's on the government website for abstraction of dishonest use of electricity. Same as abstraction. There are 2,599 offences. So that's England and Wales, and that's over 9 months.
Is that electricity?
Yeah, dishonest use of electricity, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues is we can't really have the same level of information on gas because it's not an individual crime, is it? It's sort of wrapped into a theft.
I think it's just theft generally, yeah. Theft,
yeah.
Theft other, probably, yeah.
Okay, so Philip, you'd like to be clear guidance on the NBC website, which I think is something you touched on earlier about what happens on warrants and what support can be offered. Is that the guidance you refer to?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'd like to see it clear there so everybody knows what the responsibilities are and what support there are, and that police officers that are there to assist us know what's within their remit.
Yeah, happy to support that, definitely.
Is there any other suggestions, ideas, solutions to tackle some of the issues we've discussed? Is process and guidance and some clear information one of the key points that people first needed? Looking at the last poll, I think 75% indicate that could help. Okay. So if no further ideas and solutions at this point, we'll wrap it up. But if you do think anything, you can email us at a later date. Our email address. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Rebecca and Patrick. That was really useful. Again, there's another Q&A session later on, so if there are any questions that you have, then you can just stay on and ask those questions later on. But for now, we'll move on to Lynn with the improving data collection and reporting.
Thanks, Aisha. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Tracy. Currently, all RECC parties and non-RECC parties involved in theft detection will gather data on their own systems, and I guess the data items they collect is determined by the design of their systems and what information they think is useful. The only consolidated theft data available is from the submissions for the energy theft detection incentive schemes. Currently, the purpose of the current submissions is limited to a supplier party's inclusion in those 2 theft detection incentive schemes, so the gas one and the electricity one. I guess it's demonstrating compliance with the RECC theft reduction schedule, Schedule 7, Annex 3, and we used the data that's been submitted over recent years for the incentive schemes as consideration when developing the theft estimation methodology that was completed at the end of last year, 2022. So to be clear, supplier parties should be submitting data for all suspected tampering and theft investigations. So not just the confirmed theft at the end of an investigation. So right at the start, if a supplier does desktop investigations to determine whether further investigation is needed, if at that point they're ruling out any further investigation, then that data should be submitted as part of their monthly theft incentive scheme submissions. Any open investigations should be submitted each month and updated as the investigation progresses to conclusion. Completed investigations with an unconfirmed or no theft outcome, and completed investigations with a confirmed theft and or tampering outcome. The data items are a combination of mandatory, conditional and optional items based on the investigation status and outcome. Looking at some of the items, there is a lack of clarity or purpose for some of the data items that are required. So where it says the account holder may be the beneficiary of any theft or tampering that's taken place, but there's nowhere to confirm in the submission that they are the perpetrator of that theft. So if you're wanting to pass that for prosecution, and if we were looking to collate information for that, all we would have is the account holder details, not necessarily who's responsible. Where it asks for you to submit the meter serial number, is that the meter serial number that should be at site, or if you've got a substitute meter, is it the one that's there now, the one that's been illegally placed there? And also there's a field for recording details of security devices, but do any suppliers or revenue protection service providers fit security devices anymore? Because there is no centralised record of where security devices have been fitted or if they've been removed for any subsequent purpose by an industry party. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So this is the current list of data items that are required for the purposes of the incentive scheme. Those involved in submitting returns for the incentive schemes will be familiar with the items that are on this list. And for those that aren't involved or don't have any contact with the incentive schemes, what's on this list may be a surprise to you. It could be a surprise because of what's on the list, or rather because of what's not on the list. This list is not changed much since it was first introduced approximately 9 years ago, when the first gas theft incentive scheme year started. We think it probably needs an overhaul, if only for the incentive scheme purposes, but maybe if we're looking to capture data for other purposes, then it certainly needs an overhaul. Tracy, if you can move on, please. So if we're looking at the additional reasons why we may want to collate more theft data, we've talked previously about a funded prosecutions unit. We would need the details of the perpetrator or the enabler if, for example, there is an individual that's going around selling a service, or a group of people going around selling a service. If you wanted to be able to use the funded prosecutions unit to pull that information together and to build a case, you would need to know who was responsible, who's been doing the tampering, what they're charging for it, you know, the area that they're operating in, that type of thing. We may also need to develop a risk scoring mechanism for prioritisation of cases. If there are significant numbers of cases that supplier parties or RECCo parties want to progress for prosecution, it may be that we can't take them all forward, so we would have to have a scoring mechanism, and that could be looking at the impact or potential impact on others, and we may want to record details where there's an abuse of position of trust. So if it's somebody within the industry that's going around and selling a service, or putting details out there to, you know, how to take advantage or to beat industry systems to get free energy. Those are the types of cases where they may have a priority, not because of the safety implications, but because of that abuse of position of trust. And we may want additional data for lead generation. So not necessarily to replace TRAS, but a different type of lead generation system, whether it's from publicly available data such as indices of multiple deprivation, or whether we're looking at food hygiene ratings and different business types for the types of premises where we know that theft is prevalent. We've had the section previously on smart data, so looking at tamper alerts combined with consumption data and any other information that might need in to be useful for generating leads. And things like network data, where either builders or developers or householders have put in requests for service upgrades, but those haven't progressed. Health and safety, you know, should we be gathering information to safeguard industry operatives? So where there's thefts, where there's threats of assault, or there's actual physical injury as a result of members of the public, either at the property or in neighbouring properties, not being happy with the investigations that are going on. What about injuries as a result of the actual tampered installation? So, you know, if a meter worker or someone is injured as a result of touching live cables, incidences of fire, explosions, or personal injury to consumers and other members of the public as a result of tampering. Because as we found last year when we did the freedom of information, that information isn't held anywhere, not within the industry, not outside the industry. It is very sporadic, and it's more anecdotal than factual when you try and gather that detail. Before I move on, sorry, I just Scott, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Ellen. Yeah.
Yes,
I just wanted to give an example for the funded prosecution, and it's probably more a challenge for us all, really, in terms of the stance that we found taken by the police. So we had one of the more notorious freemen of the land individuals who may have YouTube channels and Telegram posts and all the rest of it. So we, as part of our investigation, it became clear that she is behind the selling of services and is advertising slots for people to come and pay £250 to come and change your meter. When we've shared this information with the police, the response we've had back has been that it went through action fraud. The response back was to build a case, it would need reports from victims, and the victims in this case are not the energy suppliers. They are the individuals who have bought the meters from the individual, which obviously makes it very difficult for us to build a case, because it essentially means you're going to need the people who bought the meters to put a complaint into the police.
Yeah, and I guess you're going to need all parties who were affected, and that, you know, that's right across all supplier parties, isn't it, to be consistent in the information they're gathering, and the reporting of those crimes to get sufficient for it even to be worthwhile taking anything forward.
Yeah, so it's just I thought I'd just throw that challenge out there because it's one that we would love to progress with. But actually the view on who the victim is there feels strange, but it is the way it is. You know, the individuals we're finding, they're the criminal, I guess, in effect they're stealing, but they've been fraudulently led into it. So it's just one for consideration, and I'm not sure there's much we can do about it as an industry, but clearly sharing those type of examples, again, I guess that's fraught with GDPR risk and all the rest of it. But yeah, there's something there that we need to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is, but also, you know, where there's vulnerable consumers that are being impacted as well, and at the moment this comes back to, we don't have that data, we don't have it held centrally anywhere, we don't have a whole view of how many people are impacted, whether it's just certain parts of the country or whether it's widespread right across the country, whether it's widespread across all suppliers or just particular suppliers. And it's those issues that we would be able to address if we had much more robust and detailed data.
Yeah.
But thanks for that, Scott.
No worries.
Gareth, do you want to ask the question now, or can it wait until the question and answer
it is
session?
kind of linked very briefly to kind of to that, kind of this idea of victim. If someone's stealing energy, that means we all pay for it. Does that make us all not make us all victims, every customer? That was just the question. I just wondered why that wasn't something that had been progressed.
I think it's something that we'd have to look at. But thank you. We will make a note of it and consider.
Yeah,
Unless Patrick, do you want to answer?
It's a really good question. I suppose the state sometimes could be the aggrieved. Again, it's probably one of those. There's just a gap in the legislation, probably because it wasn't an issue 35 years ago, was it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just that every kilowatt hour not accounted for is paid for by other people, and every other person pays for it, even if it's a very, very, very small amount. So if someone is not paying for any energy they use deliberately, I'm paying for that, you're paying for that, Tesco's is paying for that, supermarkets pay for that, everyone pays for it. So the entire country is effectively subsidising that person in an extremely small way, or at very least the region they live in is paying for that energy use. So is that not a thing? But that was just something that occurred to me. And then I think that then links to another question, which is, we keep saying the rules here are not, the laws are not fit for purpose. And I think there's probably a lot of sympathy for that call. Who are we talking to in government about that? Is there anyone we're engaging with, whoever they are now, DESNES, BEIS, whatever we call the Home Office, Justice Department, whatever we call them nowadays, because they keep changing. Is anyone engaging with them?
I think this is the precursor to that, Gareth. We're now at a point when we've got so many different projects looking at theft that we're trying to pull together all the areas where there's massive gaps, and then determine what's the priority for them working through those gaps. And it may well be that addressing the legislative gaps is the first priority, and then everything else comes after it. Or it may be that that can be done in parallel with other things. But at least if we can, the end-to-end processing mapping should identify where it's a lack of knowledge, but also where it's a lack of legislation that is appropriate for the cause now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So a couple of other reasons why we want better data. So to continue to develop the theft estimation methodology, so we'd like to bring in network data for individual secondary substations where they're now being installed, or local area throughput for the gas, and technical losses data, to try and identify areas where there may be more theft than others. The supplier smart data, so tamper alerts and consumption data, again, business types and food hygiene ratings, and any theft in conveyance data, because at the moment, we do have figures on supplier theft or supplier responsible theft, but we don't have any data for the theft in conveyance that's identified either by gas or electric networks. And then for theft trend analysis, so we can identify, how many repeat offenders are there? Is the work we're doing and the deterrence having an impact and reducing the repeat offenders? If we're dealing with customers that are doing it through need rather than greed, then are we putting sufficient mechanisms in place to assist them and preventing them becoming repeat offenders? What level of customer switching activity is there following suspected but not confirmed theft or confirmed theft outcomes? Are there still safe havens with some suppliers, so consumers switch as soon as they're under investigation? And then home and business mover information following suspected but not confirmed or confirmed theft outcomes. Can you move on again, please? So there will be another poll coming up now. So what do you think are priorities for potential additional data requirements? Should we be looking at the data that's needed for the Funded Energy Theft Prosecutions Unit in the first instance? Should lead generation be the priority for those suppliers that are struggling to generate leads and don't really get many leads coming through from Crime Stoppers or other sources? Should it be the reporting of health and safety information for RP operative safety, or the reporting of health and safety information for safety members of the public? Should it be revision of the theft estimation methodology? Should it be for theft trend analysis, or are they all equally important? So if you can select your options and submit, please.
For this one, you'll need to click and drag or click on the arrows to do your ranking.
Yeah, apologies, Aisha, I didn't explain that bit, did I?
That's okay.
Ros, can you see the results for this? Because I can't see them when, if I go to view the poll, all it's doing is bringing up the original order.
I think I might need to close it to view the results for this one.
Okay.
So shall I give it another minute, just in case anyone has any final?
Yeah, there's, just see if it increases. There's 32 results at the moment.
Okay, it's not going up. I'll close that now then.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Are you able to see the results now?
Yeah. Yeah, so coming out as top priority is the Funded Energy Theft Prosecutions Unit, followed by reporting of health and safety information for RP operative safety, very closely followed by lead generation, and then report of health and safety information for public safety. Then all equally important, and at the bottom of the list is revision of the theft estimation methodology and theft trend analysis. So thank you for submitting your responses for that. If you can move on, please. And that's it from me. I'll pass over to Shamil. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you. Is Shamil on the call? Ah, you've made it.
I did.
Hi, Shamil. Thank you.
All right. I'm apologies. I'm in my little nephew's room today, so it's all coloured and looking all wonderful. So not in my normal office. Today I want to talk to you about why we as or the RECC should engage with water companies. So Tracy, if you can move to the next slide, please. So I've done a bit of research on how we can increase identification of theft in the commercial INC segments, and one of the things that stuck out to me was the amount of energy that's been used for illegal cryptocurrency mining, and I went down that route to do a bit of research about the machines used for cryptocurrency mining, and then the latest findings are that they use a water-cooled machines to mine cryptocurrency, and then we also found, diving into that a bit more, we found that wherever there is water meter tampering, there tends to be also energy theft. So we have, as an industry, we have no data or even evidence or information, apart from the little that was I was able to catch from Crime Stoppers article from some time ago about water meter tampering. I didn't even know that was a thing. So if you can engage with water companies, Tracy, we can move on to the next slide, please. So if you can find out if there's a potential to work with water companies to understand profiling of water usage for sites, because if they are tampering and they're likely to have higher water consumption and they've got a meter tamper, then they are likely to have a tamper on their energy meters, their gas and electricity. So like I said before, there's been a few cases where they've been found where there has been energy theft, but they also found the water meter to be tampered. So one thing, just off this, going off track, was I only knew about this because I went to the local chicken peri-peri takeaway, and the guy just got into a casual discussion with me to say what I do for work, and said I work for a gas company, and I didn't want to go into too much detail. And it's like, oh, we've been having so much trouble with the gas and the water meter because the previous tenant had tampered both. And so that's where it piqued my interest. So generally for us, in the commercial segment, it has been difficult to find leads, and we truly do believe there's potential here. Tracy, you can move on to the next slide, please. So like I touched on before, so cryptocurrency is a potential where, with the new equipment coming that they're using more water-cooled machinery. Even though this does not relate to Britain, but there was a case that was found in China where a massive setup was found to mine was found that had disguised itself as a fish farm. So underneath everything, it was all to do with cryptocurrency mining. So if water companies can identify abnormal water usage in particular areas, and then we can link that data with the sites that we are investigating to say, is there potential for finding energy theft? And also to discuss, could we set up a framework where we can share data with water companies to say, if we've got any sites where we've found confirmed cases of energy theft, pass the leads on to them to say they can go and see if there's any of their water meters tampered, and vice versa. So I believe you've got some questions next, Tracy. So these are the questions for the polls. So do you believe that they feel that there would be value in RECCo exploring opportunities to work with water companies as part of its theft reduction strategy? And the next one is, what are the areas RECCo should focus on? So options being sharing data on investigations between water and energy companies, identification of properties with higher than expected water usage, and other. You can add your comments.
looks as though there's still a couple of responses coming through.
This might be, is this another one where people can't view the results?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I'll give it a few minutes and then close it so that we can see. Okay, I'm just going to close that poll now.
Okay.
Can you see the results, Shamil?
Yes, I can. Yes. So we've
Yeah.
got with regards to do we feel that there's value in RECCo exploring opportunities? Got 67% saying yes, 6% saying no, and 27% saying unsure. The next question, what areas should RECCo focus on? Sharing data between water and energy companies, 69%, and identification of properties with higher than expected, 24%, and other, I believe there's 7%.
There's a few comments in the chat. So Keith has said water companies should also be invited on the UK RPA.
Yeah.
And Steve has said considering additional sources of information is useful, but we need to consider the cost benefits and understand how that information may be used by others.
Okay, so yeah, we can most certainly invite water companies to join UK RPA and see if there's any benefit for them, because I do believe water theft is a thing. So coming on to Steve's point, additional sources. When we take the commercial segment, for example, lead generation is a struggle. So if working together will help both segments of the industry, find and reduce theft in their relevant segments.
I mean, they're leading questions where the obvious answer is yes, but going off for a tour of China to understand more about fish factories versus the benefit we might get from finding any of these instances has to be taken into account, doesn't it? There has to be a cost benefit. It sounds great, and of course anything's beneficial, but it's not beneficial if it comes at an excessive price that exceeds its value. So we have to be considerate, and we have to be very careful with what we do with information, that we're not labeling people as thieves when actually they haven't been proven to be thieves, and we risk blacklisting. And there's been cases recently in the building industry of blacklists being created and people being prosecuted for doing so. So I think that the question is leading because, of course, the answer is going to be yes, but we need to tread carefully in some of these areas, and we need to understand fully the consequences of doing things, and also we should always be testing the value for money, because ultimately it's our money that pays for RECCo, and our money was ultimately funded by consumers. So we need to keep it in check. But yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, that's all from me.
Okay, so thank you so much, Shamil.
Thank you.
So we're back with Roz on third-party after the meter theft and demand-side response.
Hi, everyone. So in this section, we're going to talk about third-party theft and a potential emerging theft risk around demand-side response. Starting with third-party theft. So industry arrangements focus on tackling theft and conveyance upstream of the meter, or interference with the register of consumption on the meter. We are aware of instances of theft that are not clearly captured by the current arrangements, namely thefts that occur after the energy has been metered, such as a neighbour stealing or another third party downstream of the meter. The scale of the problem is currently not known, but we consider that it could be appropriate within the scope of the RECCo theft reduction strategy to look at this area, as Crime Stoppers do receive reports of third-party theft, and these should be dealt with and forwarded appropriately. Cases are occasionally referred to the Energy Ombudsman, whose decisions can impact on suppliers, despite there being a lack of clear responsibilities in this area. Greater clarity will be of benefit to industry parties and the consumers who are impacted by this type of theft. And we consider that market developments may provide greater opportunities for theft and fraud, which could be mitigated early. So that's third-party theft. In this next slide, we're just going to talk about a potential emerging theft linked to third-party theft and demand-side response. So for those who might not be familiar, demand-side response involves using financial incentives to encourage system users to change their energy usage to help balance the system. And this is electricity only that we're talking about here. Advances in technology are opening up new potential opportunities for both households and businesses to get involved in demand-side response. So we've got a growth in smart appliances that can be remotely controlled, things like washing machines, dishwashers, tumble dryers, electric vehicles charging and discharging onto the grid, and potential growth in home battery storage. So just looking at the other side of the slide here, the energy theft risk heading, we've got a diagram here that shows a potential theft scenario. So we have 4 houses, A, B, C, and D. In this example, we have houses A, B, and D with electric vehicles that are capable of delivering demand-side response by discharging onto the grid. Then we have house C. They are not drawing their energy from the network, represented by the pylon in the diagram, but instead they are stealing it from their neighbour, house B, after the point which has been metered going into house B. So it's a third-party theft here. If we just press on the slides to bring up the line, here we go. So what we have here is, let's say there were a demand-side response request, and house C responds, putting energy back onto the network that they've taken from house B. As this energy is coming via a third party, there are no RECCo provisions which address this type of scenario. So if we move on to the next slide. In terms of mitigating the risks around this, there are options that could be explored. For example, you could look at new guidance and obligations for RECCo parties or non-RECCo parties to mitigate the risks, such as guidance for suppliers on best practice, where third-party theft is suspected to help them support their customers that are experiencing it. We could look at what future data sets could be used to monitor these types of energy theft. For example, could instances of third-party theft be collected through the ETTOS data submission so that we know the extent to which it's occurring? And also, could we look at what sort of regulation and/or system changes would reduce the risk of these types of theft occurring? For example, for demand-side response-related theft, would it be desirable to have meter and asset level mapping to ensure that demand-side response energy fed onto the system couldn't exceed the stated capacity for the EVs, batteries, microgeneration registered to the property? So that's the scenarios. If we move on to the next slide, I'm going to invite your views on these. I'm just going to launch the poll now. It's another one with multiple questions, so I think these are ones that I have to close before we can see the results. So I'll give you a few minutes to respond to those polls. We also have a question, open question. Do you believe that there are any other future theft risks that should be considered under RECCo's theft strategy? For those, either raise your hand or pop them in the meeting chat, and if there's anything you agree with, put a like sign next to it. So in terms of those future risks, so potential changes in technology, consumer behaviours that could drive future theft risks there, that open question. So we've got 19 responses. I'll just give it a little bit longer. still going up there for a little bit longer. Okay, I'm just going to close the poll and we can view the results. So, do you feel that demand-side response-related theft is an emerging risk that should be within the scope of the theft reduction strategy? So we've got 47%. The largest response there is no. Do you feel third-party theft should be within the scope of the theft reduction strategy? 40% yes, 27% no, and 33% unsure. And in terms of whether anyone's ever encountered third-party theft or demand-side response-related theft, we've got 21% saying yes for third-party theft, 3% saying yes for demand-side response, and 10 rather, for both. And the majority have not encountered either. Some interesting results there. I wasn't expecting any for demand-side response there, so that is interesting. And do we have any comments on the open question? I'm not seeing any in the chat. No. Okay, if we have no further comments, we'll take this information away and feed it into next steps with regards to RECCo's reduction strategy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that, Ros. Okay, so now we're on to the second Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please raise your hand or pop them in the chat. There were a couple of questions that were, or comments as well, also in the chat from earlier. So Nicola asked about information exchange and asked if there's a list of contacts for other suppliers should we find theft in a property supplied by another supplier. So the REC portal has operational contacts. On the operational contacts list, if you filter it by column S to theft contacts, you should see the individuals who are responsible for theft within their organisations, and their contact details would be listed there. So thank you so much to Liz for sharing that also. Steve had a comment. Should we examine the centralisation of end-to-end theft management under the REC? Did you want to expand on that, please, Steve?
Well, it's an open point we've made before about bringing all of this together under a single entity to manage all of these issues and deliver that efficiency and consistent process. But it's a broader issue than some of the stuff we're talking today. I think a lot of our problems relate to the fragmentation in the market that's an inevitable consequence of competition. But does that work in reality when you're trying to address theft holistically? I think was our question. But I don't think we'll have an answer today. It was just a comment.
Okay, I was going to say, John, have you had any thinking on that?
No, don't do that to John.
Okay, thank you. Jane, I don't know if your point was covered, Jane, in terms of the point raised by Scott. So that was in regards to the funded prosecution unit, wasn't it? Are we too reliant on the police? Could we explore with trade-in standards?
So
I'm not sure.
I think the point Scott was making about people who are offering tampering as a service and who are sort of defrauding members of the public, and that point around who's the victim. If we know that there is a entity who's offering that service, is the route to take, to go through training standards, because obviously that's potentially within their remit of powers to seek to address. I don't know, it's just an alternative route if we're sort of falling into that space of not being able to clarify specifically who the victim of the theft is. Obviously, notwithstanding Gareth's point about we're all paying for the theft if it doesn't get recovered. So it's just a suggestion, really.
Thank you so much. I think Lynn's probably noted that down, and that could potentially feed into the work that's being done there.
Aisha, I have just put
Oh.
a question in the chat because one of the slides the slide that I thought that was at the end of my session wasn't there, and it was just asking what additional data items would be useful, and asking people to if they can send ideas through. So, you know, is it data items that could easily be provided if required? So they may have defined fields in their current systems, whether it's billing systems or RP field systems. Or is it information that's currently recorded in free format note fields that couldn't easily be extracted, but really ought to be available for use? And other data items or details that aren't currently captured. So the theft motivation, you know, is it need or greed? Is it tradesman error? That type of thing. But if anybody wants to share what data items they think that we really ought to be capturing, that would be a useful starting point. Thank you.
Lynn. If anyone has any feedback on Lynn's question there, it's in the chat. Then you can just add your responses to the chat or raise your hand. So far, David has said, how did Sky etc. deal with people providing boxes that stole their service? Surely we could use that approach. Patrick has responded. I believe this is covered by intellectual property laws. I'm not sure if anyone on the RECCo team wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So there is police perspective. There is a property a police intellectual property crime unit. So things such as that, films, etc. does fall under intellectual property laws. There are other examples. So you've got things like there's a food crime unit which deals with food standards from that. So there are other examples of units. It's not always down to police. I think that's a really good shout around where does that best sit, because this is a massively underreported area, isn't it, of crime. So there will only be limited, you know, whilst a dedicated policing crime unit could certainly make a real difference, this is kind of everywhere, isn't it? And it's so it does need a bit of thought around it, how best to deal with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Patrick. Do we have any more questions or comments from today's session?
Sorry, you got me on. I can't stop now. Can't stop talking.
Oh. Just go ahead.
Just one last thing that might be of interest. So there's so as we left the EU, I'll give them a comment. But something that did look at the UK GDPR was a real issue. So sharing of information has been a real challenge using GDPR. The government are running through a bit of legislation called the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, number 2. It's currently at its about to get its third reading at the House of Commons before it goes to the House of Lords. The relevance of this is that what they've done, so this is the UK version of GDPR. The relevance is the fact they've added a legitimate interest in the view of businesses sharing information for the prevention and detection of crime. So currently, when you need to share information between businesses, you need to find a lawful authority to do it. The police have got all sorts of bits of legislation, so you can share data, but that's really easy. It's difficult with business to business. This is going to add a bit of legislation to it, which means it should make things a lot easier to be able to share it. So a lot of the questions around sharing of that data, identifying common offenders, if it's for a specific purpose, hopefully when that legislation goes through, the lawyers get their head around it and understand it. That should make things a lot easier.
That's really positive if that goes through. Thank you for sharing that, Patrick. Steve, I can see your hand up.
It was because I asked the question. I mean, the third party one is intriguing, and the DSR one where you recycle it back. My question in relation to third party theft, though, if it's been delivered through the meter legally and title is transferred to the customer, that the consequential theft isn't, you don't have the same victim issue that Gareth noted, because the generality of people aren't there for victims of the crime, because the person who's had it metered is responsible for the energy they've received. So I just wondered, because Patrick's on, what what's his view with that third party type of scenario? Who's the victim there? So presumably it's the person who's had the energy, received it through their meter, paid for it, and unknowing to them, somebody's obviously teed into their supply, and he's taking it from them.
Yeah, and it's abstraction for a reason, because it's not a not commodity. It's not a tangible product, is it? Unlike gas. So yeah, I totally agree that they would be the victim in that case, which is why it's abstracting it, isn't it? I think that fits naturally.
Thank you.
You both. Do we have any more questions? Please feel free to write them in the chat if you feel too shy to speak. Oh, Shamil?
Sorry. It was about cryptocurrency and how, as an industry, how little we know about it. So to gain more knowledge and have an understanding of the size of the beast, is there potential for energy companies to work with the relevant police forces, where they could give us examples of cases where they have found illegal cryptocurrency mines and the equipment that they confiscated, so representatives from the industry can go or work with the police to understand the usage from these machines and what the setups looks like, etc. I tried to with the one that was found local to us, and we did hit a brick wall, saying that the force was not willing to engage to understand this, because it's like an ongoing case. And when we asked, could we engage with them after the case has been sorted and investigated, we didn't get very far with them.
Is that a question for Patrick or other suppliers that are on the call, or both?
Both. I'm more than happy to have different views. Understand. Should my view is we should be, because we don't know much about it. So the only way we can learn about that is to get examples of cases and understand how these things work. So will the police be willing to engage with on investigative cases like this for the benefit of the industry as a whole? And how do we navigate in requesting for such information?
So every police force is funded differently. So what you might get from one police force, you won't get from another, and vice versa. So there is no national funding for police forces in a consistent manner. So I can think of a couple of counties in the south, they've got the same population and there's 800 police officers difference. The relevance of that is that demonstrates their appetite to be able to go and do different things. So many forces are really, really stretched for resources. They will deal what's in front of them. And kind of what you're suggesting is, as important as it is in this context, they probably just wouldn't have the resource to do it. They will deal with an incident and a job, and there'll be the next one be coming through the door. And the challenge, so a lot of my world is often around the retail element of it, because that's from a touch point for policing, that's very common. The challenge in that world is that police, when they deal with an incident, what they call threat, harm and risk. So they look at the threat and harm to the individual, the victim, etc. And if that's quite low, and they've got another case, it's all about priorities. Their work will be prioritised elsewhere in terms of robberies, violence, child exploitation, that kind of stuff. So that will always be the challenge. You are trying to get a level of resource against other competing priorities.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not the giver of good news. I know that, and I seem to spend my life doing that. I think I've picked the wrong role for policing to be able to do that, but that's sadly the reality of life.
Thank you, Patrick.
you for that, Patrick. Jennifer?
Just kind of related. It's, will we need to look at expanding the theft calculator to these new different sorts of extraction sort of crimes that we're looking at? Because obviously we're able to work out roughly the amount of electricity that's been extracted for things like cannabis farms, because we can work out based on the number of heaters, the number of lights, etc., using the different calculators. But do we need to expand it when we start seeing, and if we do start seeing an increase in things like crypto farms, as how many computers there are, how many coolers there are, trying to work out a sort of rough idea of how much energy has been extracted. So as the sort of crime changes, that those different scenarios need to be added in.
Yeah, that's definitely. Oh, who was?
Sorry,
that?
it's Phil Walker. You know, you can work out the individual units if obviously the power is done, or you can use the clip-on ammeter while it's still running to work out how much is pulling through. In the case of crypto.
Jennifer,
No, so it was just with some scenarios you're not able to do it while it's still live, or you know it's kind of what sort of if for estimating how long it's been running and all the rest of it. It was just a thought of we've got a calculator for certain types of setup, but it may not cover all the ones that we're seeing now. So it was just a case of, is somebody thinking of adding those additional scenarios into calculators? So.
Yeah, so there was a theft calculator workshop last year sometime where feedback was asked from parties, but I appreciate you probably wasn't working on energy theft at the time, Jennifer, but that was definitely one of the things that was asked as to potential additions that could be made to the calculator that would help parties. So if you do have any thoughts on that, please feel free to share that with us, and we'll share that with Energy Saving Trust. Do we have any more questions or comments? Have we had enough of theft for today? Okay. Well, I think that's it then. So thank you all for attending. Thank you to our presenters, and also Patrick, who didn't present but was able to answer a multitude of questions thrown at him. So thank you so much for today. We're open to receive responses for potential topics for the next forum. So please feel free to email the technical inquiries at reccmanager.co.uk mailbox. Apologies for the motorbike in the background. And yeah, there's also going to be a survey that's sent out, so please complete that for us so we can ensure that we're delivering these sessions in a way that's suitable for you. And we will make the recording available and the material available by the end of the week, I'm hoping. I think I haven't spoken out of turn, Ros, there. So yes, thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.